In 1954, we awakened something.
Well, there's nuclear tests in the Pacific. Not tests.
They were trying to kill it.
Hi there, this is Chris and I'm here with Luke and we're here today to talk about Godzilla because we've just come from a pretty spectacular event in London. The film's director Gareth Edwards was in town to screen scenes from the movie and also talk about the film's plots and some of its secrets. So Luke, first things first, what did you think of the event overall and what you saw?
I thought it was great. So I wasn't that convinced about it before, but what I loved about it was I love the human element of it, really. Like, the performances we also were fantastic. So Bryan Cranston in particular, always very good. But the first scene we saw, which we'll talk about in a minute, his performance, like, it's heart-wrenching. Like, he's so strong in it. And again, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, he's bulked up. He's looking quite scrawny in Kick-Ass. That's kind of, I guess, part of the appeal. But he's much more bulky. It just looks like they are really kind of, they understand what it's about. It's not just a monster movie. It's about, because it's more about the people, you know, and the fear and all of that and the emotions, and it just seems like they really understood it, and it seems like they have focused on story over the kind of Michael Bay approach.
Although we did see spectacle.
Yes, there were a lot of lovely explosions.
We saw Godzilla up close and personal and it was immense.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about what we saw. I mean, Gareth came on stage and he was very nervous but also very excited because this is the first time he'd screened this much of the movie to anyone. And the first scene, we're not going to really do spoilers here. We'll talk a bit around the scenes and what happens in them without kind of giving away too much plot detail. But yeah, the first sequence takes place in Japan and it's at a power station, a power plant,
yes.
15 years ago.
Yes, so before the main thrust of the story, yeah.
Yeah, and what kind of takes place there are the events that kind of tear the family apart that's central to this story. So yeah, what did we see there, Luke?
So you've got, obviously, Bryan Cranston is there, and his wife is played by Juliette Binoche.
Yeah, and something strange is happening at the power plant.
They're having weird kind of seismic activity,
yeah.
And none of the other power plants in the region are kind of reporting it.
Yeah.
And so...
It's not, he says it's not random or jugged, it's consistent and it's increasing, so they don't really understand, they're not used to this. And yeah, they say there's a reactor breach, don't they?
Yes, everything goes quite wrong. And as they
he takes everything offline.
Yes.
And then something bad happens, which we won't talk about here, but...
Well, yeah, we won't spoil it. If you watch the trailer, the most recent trailer, there is a scene at the end of it.
Yeah.
Which is from this scene that we saw, and you can probably guess what happens, but we're not going to say it outright. But as I say, Bryan Cranston's performance following that moment is pretty heart-wrenching.
And kind of the drama there is going to kind of underpin the whole movie, I think.
Yeah.
The second scene was what they called the interrogation scene. And this is present day, so 15 years after the power plant sequence happened. And it's Bryan Cranston and his son, Ford, is the name of the character, who seems to be the central character in the movie rather than Cranston's character. Ford's played by Aaron Taylor-Johnson, and he's a soldier in the movie. And him and his father have gone back to Japan from America to investigate, I guess, and to find out, try and uncover what happened 15 years before. And it feels like whatever was happening 15 years before is happening again.
Yeah, so they go back to this power plant, which is, where everything went down all those years ago. And yeah, there's this kind of whole...
There's obviously been some kind of a cover-up because he's saying it wasn't an earthquake, it wasn't a typhoon, and you're telling people this is a death zone, but it's not. You're hiding something here.
And then,
so he's this is all an interrogation that it's basically a monologue from Cranston, isn't
because
it?
There's like military people who obviously have stopped them from going any further. He's trying to find his son. He doesn't know Aaron Taylor-Johnson's been taken. And then, as you say, towards the end of that scene, when he's like, it's not what you say, it's happening again. There's lights start going, and he says, these aren't like transistors blowing. This is an EMP. This is an electromagnetic pulse. It's disrupting things.
It's caused everything in the first place.
Yeah.
And then there's that great line from the trailer where he says it's going to send us all back to the Stone Age.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a pretty dramatic scene, and he said, Gareth said in the Q&A that scene, he had all these plans for what he was going to do with the camera and all these clever things, but then the first time they did the take, Bryan's performance was that good that he just used that first take and had to fit everything around it.
Yeah, to rework the scene to like show the things that you wanted to show and stuff. Because he like walks up against this two-way mirror, right?
Yeah.
Or one-way mirror, and it's really it's really powerful. Like Bryan Cranston's on it.
And then Gareth spoke a little bit and said that the secret although I think by this point we know what the secret is, especially with the film being called Godzilla.
Yeah.
Escapes from Japan and heads to America with the military in hot pursuit, trying to stop the public finding out about it. And it gets to Hawaii, and I think he said that a nuclear submarine goes missing off the coast of Honolulu.
Yes.
And that's where the scene starts. The character of Ford is there with the rest of his battalion. Oh no, he's on a sky train, isn't he? Or something?
Yeah. So that's
right.
another scene. But this one is where this is quite an interesting one, isn't it? Because we were talking about so basically what happens is anyway, Godzilla comes ashore and there's a tsunami, right? There's a big wave, and like we were just chatting about kind of how attitudes to nuclear issues have kind of changed in the time, because obviously Godzilla was born out of the kind of Japanese reaction to Hiroshima and Nagasaki and all of the nuclear kind of fallout from that. And actually the original design of Godzilla, something that was mentioned in our Rewind Theatre, the original design of Godzilla was made to have burnt skin, kind of as a tribute to the survivors. So, but that's kind of changed. Nuclear bombs, there's always that threat there, but that's not something we're so concerned about. But just after the whole Fukushima incident, like a couple of years ago, where the tsunami then triggered huge nuclear incidents. It's just very interesting that, there was this big tsunami and stuff, and it just does seem they're taking an old kind of motif and they're making it current. They're still keeping it with the issues. So that was quite interesting, and it was very powerful, actually. I thought.
It's definitely timely. But yeah, that scene was great. Kind of the water starts disappearing, and then the air raid sirens go off, and people start running, and then the tsunami happens, and people are running from that, and that's stuff that we've seen on news, 3 years ago. So it's quite powerful and frightening. And then, we got a glimpse at kind of the big secret that was unveiled in this screening. But unfortunately, Gareth kind of begged and pleaded that we wouldn't say what that secret is in the movie. So we're not going to spoil it here. But we did do a Rewind Theatre of the major trailer that dropped this week. And there's some clues in that one. So if you want to watch that one, it seems like we've hit upon it, but we don't really want to say it here because it is a massive spoiler. But
and you'll enjoy it more if you don't know. But if you do want to know, watch our Rewind Theatre and keep an ear out, because there's some stuff that is picked over. And Jared and Damon can email us if you want to know.
They talk, and then Gareth talked a bit about it being man versus nature, and if you mess with nature, you're not going to win. And he talks about this film being kind of revolving around the fact that trying to put things back in balance after what we, as a human race, have done earlier on in the movie. And then we had a scene that was about an attack on a train, which was an amazing visual spectacle. Takes place at night. In the dark, all the lights are out.
Very misty and stuff, right?
Yeah. But again, this is one where kind of that spoiler that we just talked about kind of it features heavily.
Yeah, it's very atmospheric is what I'd say, though. It's very, I found myself quite tense. It's not just a monster movie, it's thrilling, it's gripping. Very well shot, very haunting. I was like on the edge of my seat, quite nervous.
You kind of almost grabbed my arm in that.
I did
scene,
at one
which
stage.
I thought was a bit weird. but you're
just been waiting for the moment.
You're a scaredy cat anyway, aren't you? But that one had you scared, didn't it? That's a good thing.
It did. It was good, and so there's basically this whole thing again. This train it's high stakes because there's nuclear warheads on it, right?
Yeah.
And so for reasons we won't go into. The nuclear stock of the world is it needs to be moved to a safe place and away from populated areas for various reasons, which we know, but we're not telling you. And so the army are trying to move it, but obviously there's, Godzilla's knocking about and everyone's a bit like, oh God, what if it all goes slightly wrong? And so it's high stakes because obviously this train gets hit with all these nuclear warheads on, probably not going to go that well. So it was really, really tense.
That was definitely tense. And then the screening ended with the full Halo jump sequence, which was the teaser trailer, which I'm sure everyone out there has seen. We got a good look at that, though, from beginning to end. And it ends with such an awesome money shot.
Yeah.
That I won't say what it was, but it was pretty cool. But that Halo jump, you were saying it kind of looks like they're jumping into hell, doesn't it? The visual language.
All the fire and the kind of mist and the red, it just looks like they're jumping into hell, which is what they're doing, right? It's before the climax of the film.
Yeah.
It's so kind of intense, and I don't know, the sound wasn't final on the version we saw, so that is going to change. But there was quite a lot of stillness and just just the calm before the storm, I guess, and it was the build-up of them just kind of falling, and you just kind of hear the wind rushing past them. They're breathing because they've got these masks on because they're jumping from so high. And yeah, it was absolutely kind of stunning, and like, you know, it got us ready for the finale, and then it ended, and we were like, "What are you doing to us?"
Yeah, and then Gareth talked a little bit about just some things around the film in the Q&A afterwards. He talked about the fact that the 1954 movie was a very serious take on monster movies, and that's exactly what he wants to do with this film, which I think is good to hear. He said that he wanted to work with Bryan Cranston not because of Breaking Bad, because he hadn't actually seen that, but because of Malcolm in the Middle and an episode of Airwolf that he loves. So I thought that was a cool answer.
I think that's a good shout.
And I think the most interesting thing was that someone asked about the size and scale of Godzilla and how they figured that out. And he said that they decided that he's around 350 feet. So he would be so big that wherever you were in a city you could see him, but not too big that he couldn't be obscured. And that would kind of ruin their attempts at tension and suspense in the movie. But he also said that which helped, I think, their decision, it made him the biggest Godzilla of all time on screen.
Yeah, so they were quite...
So they've done the daddy of all Godzillas. But yeah, I mean, I think overall, like, I did really like the trailer. Maybe not as much as some of my colleagues in the office, because I'm always a bit wary, because I think you can make a really bad movie look amazing in a trailer.
You were saying that the trailers for the original were actually pretty good.
The Roland Emmerich version, were some of the best trailers I've seen, and people tend not to like that movie. It's a good trailer, but this, we've seen a lot more now. We've got a lot more of an idea of the plot, and I'm massively sold now.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was kind of excited about it, but I was one of these who was like, do we really need Godzilla again? You know, like, it's been done to death. But no, I think, as I say, there's a fresh take on it. You know, it still has cultural relevance, and I think, actually, they are taking it back to basics, and this is the film that should have been made instead of the 1998 one, really. And it looks great. It's exciting.
Cool, so that's what we thought. Let's hope we're not changing our tune when the film comes out, which is May the 16th. But there you go, we'll have more on Godzilla as and when it breaks, so stay tuned to IGN.